Trump has turned his ire on Washington, D.C.'s museums, and he is threatening to force them to remove exhibits that cast America in a negative light, i.e. he wants to censor exhibits that accurately depict the country's complicated moral history.
Trump writes on Truth Social, the museums throughout Washington, but all over the country, are essentially the last remaining segment of woke. The Smithsonian's out of control, where everything discussed is how horrible our country is, how bad slavery was, how unaccomplished the downtrodden have been. Nothing about success, with a capital S, nothing about brightness, nothing about the future. Not going to allow this to happen, and I have instructed my attorneys to go through the museums and start the exact same process that has been done with colleges and universities where tremendous progress has been made. This country cannot be woke because woke is broke. We've got the hottest country in the world, and we want people to talk about it, including in our museums.
Over on MSNBC,
I think it's kind of reasonable. You know, I'm not saying like, you know, censor this bad stuff, but at the very least say, yeah, can you show the other side of this? Can you show the side that, you know, was the dominant force in history, which is like, yeah, you know what? You can be proud of your own culture and say that even if there were bad things about it, ultimately it was a positive, you know? And it's not like, it's not old. And again, you go to any other culture in the world, they've done and or are doing horrible things, but they're very happy to have some national pride.
They're calling this a war on history. Take a look.
Plain and simple. It's a war on history. Not the history of any one group, but our collective history, as we've learned. Hadar Harris, managing director of the Freedom of Expression.
It's a war on one interpretation of certain segments of history.
Group at PEN America summed it up this way, quote, the administration's efforts to rewrite history are a betrayal of our democratic traditions and a deeply concerning effort to strip truth from the institutions that tell our national story, from the Smithsonian to our national parks. Understanding our nation's past is critical for us to be able to navigate our nation's future. And right now, all of that is in jeopardy.
Trump as curator of the American History Museum and the African American History Museum. I can't imagine that's a prospect that delights you, Niall.
It horrifies me, including the why do we want to portray slavery as so bad, which I think is an honestly offensive remark. I don't clutch my pearls at everything he says, but that is well over the line, in my view, into offensiveness.
Well, and I disagree, obviously, with Trump wanting to do this, so I'm not making a general defense of this. I don't, like, please get back to running the country, you know, get back to trying to get world peace, all that. We don't, please don't waste your time with, like, what the exhibits say at the museums. I'm not, and yes, the horror of slavery should never be underplayed. It should be taught in schools. We should teach real American history. We're not going to whitewash or sanitize. We don't need to do that at our museums either.
Pretty sure it's happening.
If it's just, also our museums don't need to be brochures for America. We don't. I guess
I don't know.
I also don't want excessive dwelling on everything being bad all the time, if that's what the museums were like. I've been to the African American History Museum, and I did not find it to be that. It was obviously about slavery and other things. It also told stories of, he said something about the downtrodden, or like about how the downtrodden
stay downtrodden, essentially.
Well, about how how they created culture and contributed, even, you know, how they worked to get out of this situation. That part of it, I think, is good. The only thing I will point to, and some of the people, I don't know that Trump knows about this specifically, but some of the anti-DEI, anti-CRT people, when they point to the African American Museum in particular, I've done this as well. There was this document on the website, The Aspects of White Supremacy Training by Tima Okun. That is not a historical document. It is in fact, I would classify it as pseudoscientific. It doesn't have some robust literature or research behind it. It is just a list of traits, including timeliness and intelligence and reading well. They say are aspects of white supremacy, and I don't think it should be taught in schools or diversity training seminars or whatever that white people are more timely than black people. That is a false notion. It's bad, and so that document shouldn't be there and shouldn't be used in training seminars. So if you're pointing to that kind of stuff, then I'm fine with it.
Yeah,
that's different reasonable. Than the exhibits.
Right. I mean, that's, as you say, a kind of pseudoscience and a weird sort of racial essential.
Let me see. Did he? All right, so we're at 423. Smithsonian. We're not going to allow this to happen. He doesn't actually mention everything discusses how horrible the country is. He doesn't mention exhibits specifically. He actually just says the museums. So very easily could just be like, the kind of the training stuff, the general kind of conversation.
Which I think is very distasteful always. Now, I was under the impression that document had been removed or taken down.
Yep,
so
that was taken down.
And
I don't think that was like censorship to take that down. It's not a historical document. It just didn't belong as part of the museum.
Right. Now, in that instance, yes, that thing is bad or foolish or whatever we want to term it. I don't think that the mere existence of that document for a comparatively brief period of time should be used to besmirch, for example, the broader African American History Museum, which is a very, to my mind, impressive, moving account of a particular strand in the country's history. I do, of course, acknowledge that how you teach history is complicated, and it is not the case that there is a sole objective historical truth that just is told or is deviated from. Of course it's complicated. It's complicated anywhere in the world. Where I have a major problem here is the Trump administration's view in a separate document that they don't want things that are out of alignment with his view of history or his values. That seems to me to carry more than a whiff of sort of tin pot dictatorship stuff. And I think that is part of a broader picture where Trump has a propensity for those kinds of cases.
Sure.
So the idea that the president, the leader, can dictate what history is taught and what's not, depending on how it aligns with what he likes, I have massive problems with that.
Yeah, I have a problem with that too.
Sure, I don't see him doing it.
Of course, it always gets a little trickier when you're talking about a public institution that should both have editorial independence and free speech and all those kinds of protections. But if itself draws funding from taxpayers, then what level of input is, I mean, not the President of the United States, but the taxpayer, how much do they get to decide the thing they're funding? This is probably a more prescient question for schools rather than museums, although
for sure.
as a libertarian, I'd probably be perfectly fine to have all the museums private or like privately administered and privately funded. It'd be better for them, and then they can tell the president, fuck off, I don't care.
But then they just charge people to get in, whereas now we have
you can find a nice benefactor who makes it I bet you would love the Elon Musk Museum.
I'd be running for the hills rather than going
with
to
schools, I want real history obviously taught in schools, and I think it is in the vast majority of schools in this country.
It is.
The parents have some right over the say in how their kids are educated, and my solution to this is
they're paying for it.
Broadly letting schools do whatever they want, and then saying, well, you, the family, get to decide what is the school you want, and that's the way to kind of lower the temperatures around the fight about, no, the school has to teach exactly these things and have exactly these books in the library.
That's
reasonable. Just have more choice for everyone.
Yeah, but in relation to the Trump issue with museums, he talks, for example, about being opposed to divisive lessons or divisive accounting of history. And the whole...
I think it's terms like divisiveness in terms of American identity, like splitting up Americans into black and white and Asian, all these different things, as opposed to a sort of a unified view of, okay, all these people are Americans. We're looking at American history, whether that's, black Americans, white Americans, Asian Americans, blah, 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 blah. It's just, it's an American story. Each group is, an important actor in that, but it is the American story. I can kind of understand that.
I mean, the whole struggle of history is about division, right? It doesn't really matter whether it's about race or women's rights or any other topic. History is always about division. And how do you teach, for example, let's say the history of integration in this country without, instances like Little Rock or James Meredith or Ruby Bridges, people who were faced with the most appalling abuse for simply integrating previously white institutions.
I have a totally non-ideological issue about how history is taught in many schools in America, and that there's more history every year, and like there's more things they got to squeeze in. I mean, genuinely, when you teach European history, for example, you often don't get to the 20th century. World War I and World War II get the shaft. Frankly, in American history, I think the struggle leading up to the Civil War is taught. Again, I'm not in charge of every school in America. I'm sure it's taught badly somewhere, but is covered pretty exhaustively relative to later things that happen in history, just because they run out of time to teach them. And I actually worry more about American history students being just deprived of knowledge. Again, strip the ideological valence out of it, but just knowledge about things that happened before they were born.
Before anyone alive was born. That's the other side of it. Is a lot of this, and I mean, this is very true for the teaching of history and education in general, but I mean, how pragmatic do you want to be about education? Should you be looking at education as, something that is there for practical benefit? This is there for the benefit of the student, and therefore they should be taught things that make their, future prospects better. Okay, if that's the case, then, you should be looking at things like in terms of teaching math. Algebra 2, calculus should not be the goal of high school mathematics. The goal of high school mathematics should be statistics. Because statistics are things that you can use in a day-to-day existence. Calculus outside of, higher ed sciences, in terms of your higher mathematics, your higher chemistries and physics, calculus is just completely useless. It's worthless. You shouldn't have it. There's no point learning it. You'll never use it ever. You'll never have any chance to use it. It's completely worthless. Statistics, on the other hand, how often do you see statistics? If you watch the news, every day you watch the news, you've got statistics in your face. If every American had a working knowledge of statistics from high school education, they would be massively better educated to deal with the world in general. Straight up, full stop, no problem, but done. Okay? In terms of history, if you had enormous, incredible knowledge of the last 100 years of history, but very nebulous, just super basic ideas of what happened every time, 10,000 years up to 100 years ago. And you're some stuff happened. I know, there was Greeks and there were these types of things. All of that stuff is kind of glossed over. And then the new stuff is what's focused on. You would be better off. You'd be better educated to deal with the world as it is. You just would. You just straight up would, because those are the things that are more important that might have an impact on you. And this is not the case with all of these far-flung historical things. And with a lot of education, this is the case. It's taught in such a way that it is not taking pragmatic practicalities into account. It's got much more to do with, this is kind of always how it was done. We're looking at the tradition of this, and this is how it was taught. So calculus is what you're trying to learn. That's what you're trying to get out of it. What does this get to the normal average student? Nothing. And I'm well, it doesn't matter. That's what they need to do. Okay, well, a lot of students do not really like math. So if you're forcing them to do something that they don't like and they don't get anything out of it, you're just wasting their time and you're making them hate school. As opposed to, okay, you're forcing them to do something like some people don't like history class. Okay, but you know what? You'll actually learn about what's going on in the news. You'll be able to draw parallels. You'll be able to figure stuff out. I know you hate it. You're not good at it. That's fine. But at the very least, you come out of this educated with a better head on your shoulders to tackle problems that might actually come up in your day-to-day life. That's kind of what we should be doing with history classes and just probably education in general, which is something that I have to say, I like the idea of Trump approaching this stuff from an aspect. I don't know if he was, thinking about it in this respect, but you know what? Let's say there is a truth in history. And the truth, if it's taught, massively demoralizes a segment of the population, such that they're like, we're not going to, like, they get jobs at a far lesser rate. They earn less money over the course of their lifetimes. They're much less unhappy. They're much less successful. Should you be teaching that truth in history classes to everybody, just indiscriminately putting it out there for everybody? Or should you go, you know what, we're not going to teach that. We've got limited time. We can't teach everything. We're just going to, this is a thing, is, yeah, we know it's true, but you know what, we're not going to mention it. All right. If people want to look into it, we're not censoring it. We're not keeping it out of anybody's hands, but we're not going to go out of our way to force it down our students' throats, because it's going to make them more successful people in their daily lives. That doesn't seem like a horrible idea to me. And so if, like, again, there's a quantifiable way to measure this, but let's say teaching slavery for, like, again, Robbie's right here, it is absolutely taught disproportionately, the lead up to the Civil War and slavery and these types of things. It is generally a disproportionate amount of time, classroom, spent on it versus the amount of years it covers in history. If it was the case that teaching that demoralized certain students, and you go, okay, they're not performing as well after these lessons or these types of things, after they've taken them home and they've integrated them into their understanding of the world, would it be the worst thing in the world to go, you know what, we're just gonna we won't teach that? Like, because most people don't really, they don't actually care about history. They don't, it doesn't really impact them, especially because, again, even like the Civil War, which is relatively recent in history, is still, like, no one alive experienced the Civil War. Not at all. Okay, no one. So no one is affected by it, in real terms, if nobody knows exactly what happened with it. So I'm kind of, there is, I think, there should be a real legitimate argument for, like, looking at what's being taught. And you know what, if we're whitewashing history, but it makes everybody's lives better, go ahead and whitewash it. Do you really have that much of an attachment to truth that you would ruin other people's lives just so that, they could be forced to learn this stuff that's going to, like, hurt them? I don't think you should. Maybe you do, but I don't think you should. I think that's kind of a bad look. That's me.